It's been wild. I had to turn my studio upside down for the filming past couple of days. We were filming Spanish content up here. And so it was like kind of chaos for a couple of days. No, I had no idea what was going on. Yeah. Every time they got done with the interview, I'm like, I'm sure that was very meaningful. Thank you for coming today. It's like, I have no idea what you said. But yeah, it was a Spanish party up here. And it was great. Huso Robinson, our pastor at Missouri City, Emmanuel, in the morning, he ran all the interviews, and then in the afternoon, he taught 6 lessons to the camera because they translate Roger's teachings verbatim. And so Justo's reading to the camera, which is funny because Spanish takes more words to say the same things. And so his lessons actually end up being longer than Roger's because it takes more Spanish words to get the same point across for some reason. So it was. I would not have guessed that. It was a marathon afternoon for that man, and he did a great job. But that was my. You're like all over. You're sitting on camera. I'm literally up here with like 3 other people for 2 days and didn't see anyone. Like you even asked me like, where were you? I was like, I was working, but not where y'all were.
No one saw you the entire time. Yeah. I did find that when you have to stare at someone who's talking for like 10 minutes. And you're nodding, and you're like, "I'm with you." Mm-hmm. You start to become very aware of what you're so curious about what your face is doing. Yeah, you're like, "Am I still smiling or my eyebrow?" So if you like micro watch the show, you'll see me have a lot of reflective moments. Like, I will say, on the second day that the air, like the sun, kind of came in. And the air conditioner was like, "Hey, I'm on my break."
Because y'all were in a house the second day,
and it's a beautiful home. But the air was like...
It was working overtime. It was Texas heat, 106 degrees outside with 30 people in a house.
It was
like pretty up there, yeah.
When I got back to my car, it was 109 when I turned my car on.
Well, you survived.
But it got warmer, and it was after we'd had this fabulous lunch. And it was like, we'd all been given a big sleeping pill. It was just like...
It's tough.
But it was a fun time. It was good. And I think it's going to be an incredible 2 series.
I can't wait to see you in both of those series in the background, looking engaged and paying attention.
Just with the overnodder. I'm a little bit of an overnodder. Mm-hmm. I think it's the best of us. So,
well, maybe
speaking of overnodding, we've got a lot to talk about today.
Is that how you want to start? Great. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to the Almost Amazing podcast from the CityRise Network. Hosted by Jennifer Dennis and produced by me, Justin Kello, we're a podcast that was supposed to be focused on parenting, but we've kind of lost the plot along the way. Honestly, we don't know what this podcast is about, but we talk to incredible people who love Jesus, and our hope is to provide encouragement and fun whenever possible. If our lack of clear direction bothers you, we apologize, but no one is making you listen to this podcast, unless you're married to Jennifer. Andy, thanks for listening.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Almost Amazing podcast. We're excited to have you today. Thank you for joining us, and we have a great show planned. To begin our show, we have Justin Kello.
Hello.
Justin, how are you today?
I am great, Jennifer. How are you?
Great. How are you making it through the summer? We're finishing
up. I am telling you right now, I am full of a giant bowl of spaghetti.
Oh, dear.
Because we just had a lunch meeting hosted by you. And I am so thankful for the lunch. But like 10 minutes for lunch, y'all decided where we're going to eat or what you're going to order. And I get this phone call.
Let me say, did you decide on the 11:30 meeting?
I did not.
I thought maybe you had assigned it 11:30. And I thought, and our audience would agree with me, this is Justin's clever way.
I love a free meal.
Because we know how you feel about a free meal.
I love a free meal, but that wasn't me. That was your Lauren. But I get this call like, hey, we're ordering from Olive Garden. What do you want? And then y'all kind of laugh. I was like, oh, is this a joke? And they're like, oh, no, we're really ordering from Olive Garden. And I was like, okay.
In Houston, when you have thousands of selections.
Yeah. Well, here's what's funny about it. A giant bowl. So I was like, I get spaghetti or whatever. And it comes and it's like, I was just like, why Olive Garden? But 2, there is nothing I want less on a hot summer day than a huge bowl of warm pasta. And I was like, what are these people thinking? I am thankful for the free meal and I gobbled it up. But at the same time, I'm sitting here with a pile of pasta in my stomach and it's 107 degrees outside. And it was such a funny, like out of left field choice.
Well, and I told them all because we have a lot of great options, but for some reason, my team and we have all these little rules about where we eat and won't eat that it really limits us more than you'd believe. Yeah. Like I have a list of don't even ask me, I'm not eating there. Okay. And then there's for example, I'm really sick of Mediterranean. I'm so done.
Oh, that is pretty popular with our church. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. That's all we ever do is grilled chicken, a pita, some hummus, and a vinaigrette. And I'm just over it. So that knocks out a big list of people's. And then it's like, any grills that are near, we've just done those to death. And we're just kind of tired of those. Then the next level is, how long has it been since you've had Mexican food? Because I could eat Mexican food almost every meal. But it's like, we had Mexican yesterday for something else. Okay. And so Mexican was off the table. Okay. And then, so at that point, someone's like, oh, then we're thinking salads. And someone's like, oh, I love the Olive Garden salad. And it was like, everyone's like, oh, Olive Garden. Let's eat Olive Garden. Yep. And then I was like, who tells Justin that we're ordering Olive Garden? Because Justin's like one of the foodies on staff. Yeah. You're like a foodie on staff.
I mean, I just like food, and I like that Houston has good food. And I will eat a chain. I don't mind chain restaurants. It's just, I hadn't eaten Olive Garden in like 10 years. But what's so funny about Olive Garden to me is there's a personal memory attached to it. My dad, we went to New York on a vacation in Times Square. My dad was the opposite of me. When he went, he wanted to know exactly what food he was eating. He was not going to go to an adventurous restaurant. So when I travel, I'm like, I want to try something new.
Sure, of course.
When he travels, he's like, everything else is chaos in my life on this trip. I want to know what I'm eating for lunch. Like, I want to get something I know.
He didn't really hold on to that.
Yeah. And so we were in Times Square eating at Olive Garden.
That is funny. I was
like, so
that's funny.
That's a personal connection I have to Olive Garden. But that's what I'm feeling today. How are you? What's going on with you, Jennifer?
Well, I am feeling pretty well. I was thinking about aging. I've been thinking a lot about aging. We've been shooting on these videos with Roger, and some great campaigns coming out that I think will be really amazing. But we're getting our makeup touched up every day. Mm-hmm. And so the first time they're touching up my makeup, and I'm like, yeah, I was like, I've been out of town on a mission trip, so I'm a little, and they're like, you need maybe a skincare routine. And I realized I don't have a skincare routine. I just wash my face or put on makeup. But they have all these serums now and have all this. Right now, it's very simple for me. But I've been thinking about aging. Yeah. Maybe I'm going to cut all that part out.
I don't think any of it was inappropriate, but
because it's kind of overdone. But our brains never age. Like, we never feel like when I look in a mirror, I'm going to be looking at someone who's over 50. And it's always just like a little bit of a surprise. Mm-hmm. But I was thinking the other day, so to my daughter, I am an older woman. Mm-hmm. And to my daughter, I think in older woman ways, even though as a Gen Xer, I don't feel that way at all.
Right.
So one example is, it's harder for me to go to movies now. And the younger me would have never said, because it's just too loud. Right. It's a lot of loudness. It's dark. It's hard to get around. Mm-hmm. It's funny because I used to love going to the theater. Mm-hmm. And now I'm like, it's really dark. Wow. And so now that's like that old person of me kind of coming out. Mm-hmm. And I'm starting to see that in different areas where I'm like, oh, that's old lady sounding. Yeah. And so I'm trying to figure out a way if I should adjust that or just embrace that.
My wife was mentioning that a little bit, especially about like trends, because she's seeing TikTok trends like update this millennial look, like how to be a millennial but look more up to date.
And that's be tough for millennials.
Every time
I think they are the
every time she watches it, she's like, well, I much prefer the original outfit. I think that's very cute, and I think it's perfect. Why would you update it to this thing that you just did? Like, it's just the style is so different that in her head, she still feels this is current and popular and cool looking. And to all the fellow millennials, it is. No millennial is going to be like, that's out of date. We all love it. We all love that style. But this idea of like not feeling I think I'm 23. I feel like I'm 23 years old. I don't feel any different.
And when you're at 23, you're looking at your parents and they're explaining to you why they cannot have Mexican food after 5 p.m. at night. And you're like, oh, they're getting old. But now I'm almost to the point where I'm like, no more Mexican food after 5 o'clock at night. Yeah. It wreaks havoc on my stomach. It's hard to sleep. It's a misery. Dude. And then I'm like, oh no.
Dude, I came to that realization so we used to have a New Year's Eve party every year with some friends. We'd go to their hometown and stay up all late and eat garbage food, just terrible food. And we were fine. After a couple more years of doing that, like the kind of last year we all got together, I ate like I normally did. And I woke up just sick at like 4 a.m. because I had eaten like I had every other year on New Year's Eve. Just we had this great spread of all this great, food. And I just like gorged myself on it. And every other year I'd been fine. And I was like, my body can't do this anymore.
You crossed over.
I can't go to a party and just eat whatever I want and not expect to be miserable at 4 a.m. So your body does feel different, but your brain's still like, I'm young.
You're like, I feel just like you do.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, but I'm definitely not going to jump in a car with 6 other people and drive to Florida for the afternoon.
Nate Bargatze makes a joke about this. He's like, when you're like 40 or whatever, you're hanging out with other people that are like 30 and you're like, oh, we're the same age. We're cool. These are my age guys. And then someone 45 walks in. You're like, get out of here, old man. Like this is young people.
What are you doing?
Like your perception of old continues to be just a few years older than you. It's like, oh, I'm never going to be old.
Right.
Like,
I will never feel that way or make those choices.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, you're like, there you are.
Yeah.
There you are.
I'm excited to talk about today. We're talking about the Ireland trip, and I just want to share this before we bring on our guest. I was texting you back and forth about some stuff, and I said, hey, can you do something? And you're like, hey, ended up on set for this filming both days, and I wasn't able to do this while I was in Ireland. And then you said, are you Irish? And then you said, when are you able to podcast this week? Like your train of thought, you didn't even stop to wait.
Well, is Kello Irish?
I think it's Scottish, but it was just funny that your train of thought was, hey, I couldn't do this last week. Are you Irish? Hey, when you could there was not a breath in the text message to even explain that thought. So I ignored it. I did not respond to the middle question.
I could see the Scottish because you do have some red highlights.
Yeah. I think we're Scottish, German or something.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it used to be McCullough.
Oh, yeah, maybe. Man, I loved it there. And I'm excited to talk about the trip today. That's why we have the guests that we have. So I'm really excited about everything coming today. So obviously, I had to bring in our team leader from Ireland because we just got back. So welcome, Eric Campbell.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate any opportunity to talk about missions.
Dude, Eric is a rock star in missions. Like
so true.
I don't know if there's a trip you haven't been on with our church. Like you've been to almost every partner that we have at some point.
I have not been to Thailand yet.
Thailand. Okay.
That might be the only one.
Well, I remember, didn't you put a Coca-Cola machine in the gym to collect money for missions?
It was short-lived. Yes, I did. And it never really brought in that much.
It never really took off.
Yeah.
But it was also to raise awareness, I think, just to have that awareness every time somebody came up and down.
Yeah.
That we were supporting missions.
That's good because funding wise, our church is incredibly generous towards missions. Like what I'm saying? It's incredible. I've been to previous churches where everything we did, we had to fundraise. Everything we did, we had to send out letters. We had to ask, but our church has a budget dedicated from tithes and offerings specifically for these moments to partner with our mission
True.
partners.
I think we're up to 13 international trips a year, if I'm not mistaken.
I think Chuck mentioned that last week.
Everywhere from like you said, Thailand to, it's all over the world. So Eric and I.
But Ireland's new, right? This is new.
This is the first trip to Ireland.
Well, how did Ireland come about? How did this come out?
Bobby and Alita O'Neill have a home there. I can't remember 2007. I can't remember when they bought a place there.
That sounds about right. 2007, 2008.
And so, of course, they would spend a lot of time there and would go to churches there. And I think especially recently or before Alita passed away, I think pastors would approach them knowing they were from the States.
Okay.
And just sort of talk about how sad it was that the churches seemed to be waning over there. Mm-hmm. And I think they went to different churches, right? I think the Methodist Church and the Anglican Church and several different ones they would try around. And I think they all sort of mentioned how they would love to have some help somehow. They didn't know what that looked like, but just try to revitalize.
Yes.
Because they talked about, I think the sad part is this generation, Bobby and Alita's generation, once they're gone, that might be it for the church there in Ireland.
Right. And we visited a couple of the churches. And it's true. There's lower attendance, not many young families. And then we partnered with Pam. We had her earlier on the show.
Yes.
At the mission show. And she wanted to bring a team over to work with her church, Oasis, that's in Rosscray. And so she wanted to have a VBS. And so it seemed like everything aligned to where it was time to bring a team from our church to lead VBS. So that's why I think I got to go.
Yeah.
Because, I've done that.
Absolutely. You did the heavy lifting. That's the lion's share of.
Well, it was.
Do you have gum in your mouth?
No.
Jennifer!
Hold on.
I was just like, I didn't want to
put it behind your ear.
You're like, why? Why is she being weird?
How is it?
So we got to go to Ireland, and a lot of people have been like, "Oh, Ireland, that's a tough trip."
Yeah.
But the uniqueness is their faith is historical.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of their identity. It's part of their culture, but it's not necessarily a personal relationship with Christ.
Yeah. Well, can you speak to that, Eric? I think a lot of times when we think of missions, and even a lot of our mission partners are in lower income, lower socioeconomic, like kind of like the traditional places you think need our help. So how would you explain to someone who would say exactly what you just said? Oh, Ireland, that must be a hard place. Like, what would you tell them about the needs there and why it's important to not only go to places that are obviously, financially disadvantaged?
Well, I think first of all, everybody needs to have a personal relationship with Jesus. I think Ireland may be similar to the States. I think they would consider themselves a, quote, Christian country. But as far as weekly attendance or personal relationship with Jesus, I don't know how strong that would be. So I think just the need is there to share the love of Jesus. I was researching, I think 78% of the country is Catholic, and the rest of them, Church of Ireland, Methodist, are all single digits. Yeah. But just because you were raised, it's like asking somebody, are you a Christian? Well, my parents grew up in the church.
Right.
Well, but what about you? What is your relationship? What is your personal relationship?
Yeah. Cultural Catholicism is very much almost like cultural Judaism, in that like someone will say, oh yeah, I'm Catholic, but they're not practicing. They don't have a relationship with Jesus. They don't go to mass, but they'll just say they're Catholic. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. That's what I thought.
So we were talking about sharing the gospel, and we're having this VBS. She wanted to bring a lot of energy, bring a group. So we brought a team of about 5 young folk, teenager, young 20s. And it was, I think the second day I asked Pam, I go, tomorrow we're giving the gospel. Is that okay? And she said, yes. She says, it's fine. Some of the people have been a little concerned that it's maybe stepping on toes a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then she just looks at me and she goes, but let's do it. Let's share the gospel. And so on Wednesday, we shared the gospel in all the small group rotations for the day. And I think we had around 50 kids that were there. Mm-hmm. And so many of them wanted to be part of asking Jesus into their heart, having a relationship with Jesus, to know more about this. They were super engaged, and it was really meaningful. And probably my favorite moment on the trip was after the first group, and these kids raised their hand. I want a personal relationship with Jesus. She ran over to me and she just hugged me so tight and just said, thank you for sharing with them. Thank you for this.
Wow.
And so it really rings true what Eric said. Everyone needs to hear about Jesus, mm-hmm. even the children in Ireland that are running around in 76-degree.
Oh, I'm sure it was glorious.
It was green pastures.
When you got off of the plane back in Houston and you walk outside of the terminal, and you feel that air for the first time after being in a different location.
It was like being shoved into a giant used Huggy. Like a giant Snuggie. You know those big Snuggie blankets people wear around?
Yeah,
it was just like someone threw you into one of those.
A big damp like Snuggie.
Like your big old papa has been hanging out in that in 6 weeks and they just threw you into it.
It's shocking. I'm sure it was gorgeous there.
It was awful. Yeah. It was awful.
We're back to normal now.
Yeah.
Oh, the weather, man. It was.
Well, I'd love to hear a little bit more, Eric, not only about Ireland, but
I like how you're directing. Eric, I'd like to hear more.
I'm tired of hearing about Jennifer's sweat. What I'm saying is we're talking about how Eric's been on a lot of trips. And I do know from what I know about you, it has not always been that way where you felt connected to missions. It's something you discovered maybe a little bit later in life.
Much later in life. Okay. I think it was 40 years old.
Okay. I'd love to hear kind of the genesis of your, passion and interest in sharing the gospel outside of our country.
So it's a 3 or 4 minute answer. Is that a problem?
34 minutes?
3 or 4.
Oh, yeah.
Not 34. So I call myself a church mutt. I was raised in the church. I remember my mother and father taking my brother and I to church. Probably 6 years old, 8 years old. I was confirmed in the Methodist church. I think it was at a VBS one summer when I was 8 years old that I prayed to give my life to Christ. And I tell people that was the beginning, not the end of my walk. I was going to a Methodist church on the weekend. I was attending a Lutheran church, little parochial school during the week. And then my parents switched to a Presbyterian church on the weekends. And I started going to an Episcopal high school. So I kind of had all this wonderful experience, and it was really giving me a lot of head knowledge. Fast forward to Texas A&M, I meet Kristen, we fall in love, whirlwind engagement. We were married and engaged like within less than a year. She was raised in the Baptist church, I was not. And so she said, we need to find a church home. I thought, well, I've already got a church that I'm familiar with. I've got the knowledge here. She said, we really need a church family. I thought, well, I've got a family. I wasn't putting those two together. So we tried a lot of different churches, ended up being here. And I think it was the second week that the children's minister here, Miss Barbara, put us to work. I mean, came up to us and said, hey, I need your help in kids' Sunday school, you know, and it was at that time, the little spark sort of connects, you know, head knowledge and heart knowledge, and just teaching little kids was fun. Kristen sort of convinced me to go to a men's Bible study fellowship. I was in there for 9 years. The second year they said, hey, can you help out in the kids program? And I said, yes. And then the third year they're like, hey, can you run the children's program? And so I did that for like 8 years. Wow. And then Kristen and I were visiting my brother-in-law's church up in Dallas. They had just gotten back from this ministry where they had taken shoes to kids in Ecuador and washed their feet and shared the gospel. And Kristen says, we need to do something like that at our church. I'd never been on a mission trip before. So she got the whole group organized and trained, and we get to the airport. I think we had a team of 23. And out of that group, 3 people, including Kristen, had issues with their passports expiring within 6 months. That's why we're so, you know, we ask that question so much now because it ruined 3 people's trip. One of them was Kristen's. And I wasn't going to go. She wasn't going to go, but she literally pushed me on the plane. And I just remember it's a 5-hour flight, sitting there with an empty seat next to me, sort of arguing with God for like 5 hours on that trip down there. Like, how can you take my wife out of this trip? She's the one who planned it. It was her heart to come, and I'm just sort of along for the ride because she wanted, you know, me to go. And I remember just sort of telling God, I'll give you a week. You know, you've got me sort of captive. I'm here. I've taken off work. I mean, literally, I sort of started thinking, he sort of stripped away from me everything that you sort of value as a man. He took away my wife. He took away my kids. I mean, they were back home with grandma and grandpa, you know, having a good time. I left my job for a week. So I literally had nothing but my will. And I'm like, you know, I'll give you a week. Show me what you got. And he took me on this emotional roller coaster ride. And I remember it was the last day. And in fact, that was Stacy Pinnell was on that trip. Wow. She and I, to tie it back to Ireland, were on that trip together with a bunch of other people. But
is that the O'Neill's?
The O'Neill's daughter.
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
Stacy. And I just remember we were at this last village working. So many people started to come. You know, once you say, hey, the Americans are here giving out free shoes, they start dropping off kids in bus loads and truckloads. And we had to have a police escort out of town. It had gotten so busy and crazy. But there was a little boy that I saw off on his own, sort of at the fringes, you know, that wasn't engaged, were too afraid to kind of approach and get in line for shoes. And so I kind of went over and started talking to him. And his name was Marco. And I brought him inside, washed his feet. We used these little salvation bracelets to share the gospel, and just kind of went through the beads, and we ended up praying together, and he asked Jesus into his heart. And he got up to leave, but he sort of stopped in the doorway and then came back and gave me a big hug, but he didn't let go. And he just held on so tight. And I just literally broke down and started weeping. And I'm like, okay, God, I get why I'm here. I realized he needed me alone that week without my wife and all those distractions to kind of work on me and my heart. And just realized that he wanted me to tell people about Jesus and to love on them. So that was really the genesis of it. That was, I don't know, 15 years ago. And then I try to sign up for every mission trip that seems to come along.
Well, not only that, that trip has now turned into the
Was
annual...
that the first Ecuador trip?
That was the very first Ecuador trip. And out of that, I mean, we went after that to Costa Rica a couple of times and Guatemala. And then I sort of had this crazy idea and approached Robbie and Chuck and said, hey, what about taking our group of high school seniors that's graduating sort of as a gift? Hey, thank you for being in our programs for all these years and for volunteering and giving back and being a part of this church, and sort of just as a gift to set them on a firm foundation before they go off to school.
That was your idea?
Well,
that's amazing.
Kristen and mine, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
That's so
we've
cool.
gone for 11 years. I think we were off a couple of years for COVID. So I think we've been doing 11 years, taking 9 trips of seniors, and we've had almost 9,000 opportunities to share the gospel. So that's been amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. Our students are amazing.
That, like, just that one, when you're on the plane and you're like, I'll give you 1 week, show me what you can do. That's incredible to be at that point with God. I mean, I just love that God reached out, stripped everything to the side to pull you in and give you vision and heart. And it's like, I just love that. I love that story. That made me cry too. I teared up a little bit. But that's amazing, Eric. Well, I loved having Eric as our leader on the trip. He's very service oriented. And
servant's heart.
So easy to get along with.
Calm and easygoing. I mean, just in the midst of chaos, he has an even temperament, like regardless. I'm sure there's some things that rile you up. I've never seen on the mission field. I've been to Ecuador with you. I've been to Alaska with you. Like he's
really
cool.
do need those people that are just stay calm in storms.
Yeah.
And that, I think they're worth their weight in gold, especially when you're overseas.
Well, I have to give Kristen Campbell all the credit. She's really the one. I mean, Chuck's smart. Chuck asked me to do it, but I know that he was finagling for the package deal. Kristen
Chuck
Campbell
is no dummy.
Being the amazing leader and
pastor.
organizer, and she's phenomenal. So it would not have happened without her. Yeah. But I was just grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, I will say Kristen was not going to waste a minute. So we got to see really incredible things. And one of my favorite was to see some of these ancient texts, to see some of these biblical texts that were from 800 AD, and to just to see that our faith, is connected, that people worked so hard to connect our faith over the years. We really loved that. It was the Book of Kells.
Yes.
In Ireland. That was.
What is that? I don't understand what that is.
The Book of Kells is, I think, a manuscript from the 800s. It's the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But it's an illustrated version that I think they figured 3 or 4 monks wrote and illustrated. They each had different parts. Some would write the text and some would do the illustrations. But it's the Gospels. But
the first picture Bible.
800s.
It might be the first picture back. It's really beautiful. The colors, it's really beautiful and rich. And then we got to go, we were able to tour a monastery and we were able to see some writings.
Did you have to be quiet?
No, we had a wonderful tour by, I don't know if he's the head monk, what you call him. Oh. Father Malachi kind of took us on the
When I think monastery, I think library, like quiet.
It was a library.
Yeah.
But he pulls out this manuscript from, what was that one, 1100 or something? It's like a little cardboard box.
It was written on like animal skin. Oh. And that was from 1100 AD.
Yeah, that was a recent one.
That was recent. That's a new one.
Copy.
Just before they put it online.
Right.
Wow.
And so to be in touch with that history so we get to see churches. We get to be around churches and buildings that have been in place since 400 AD.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And so I know in the United States we have things, but they have like 30,000 ruins in Ireland.
Oh, we have nothing that old. I mean, as far as like the age of our country is a joke when it comes to the age. Like natural wonders, we have those. We got natural wonders. But when it comes to like civilized like history, we're just like, we're a joke to the rest of the world.
It's true. It's true. And they don't like, you're just walking down the road and it's like, there's a castle right next to.
Yeah, in the middle of a cow pasture. Yeah. There's some ruins. Let's get out and go look at it.
It was cool, but to see and on the Friday night, on Friday we invited the families, much like we do on Wednesday when we have families come to VBS to eat lunch out on the grounds. We invited all these families, and that's when all of these pastors had the opportunity to connect with all of these families that come through the week. And Chuck looked at me and he goes, "This is why we're here, right here, for these families to connect to these churches and find out what's going on."
Yeah.
and to reinfuse and get them back involved.
I love that because I'm seeing on social media just, especially people that are ex-evangelicals leaving the church that just have this, like, they turn their nose up at short-term missions, because there were many years where short-term missions were kind of like a poverty tour, just straight up, you go, you give some gifts and you leave. And I think that there's been some of that not in our past, but in the past of the church. But now these short-term trips are so intentional about like connecting local people with local Christians. Like, it's not about us going in and getting all the glory and getting all the pictures and getting all the fuzzy stories. It's who is the local partner and how do we make them known in this community, and how do we build those relationships across so that when we leave, all we were the ones putting their hands together, and then the person who's been there faithfully tilling the soil for the past 10 years is building those relationships. And so I love to hear every one of our mission trips is like that. And so if you ever get this connotation of a mission trip is just y'all go and take pictures with kids in an orphanage, like, no, like, that's absolutely not what our church does. And that's not what almost any church I know does anymore. It's this idea of going, strategically partnering with local Christians and helping them build the local church. And we just do that in different ways. In Ireland, it's VBS. In Ecuador, it's shoes, but it's all the same mentality.
I agree. I think it's really good. So tell us, what was your favorite part about Ireland itself, or being in Ireland? And this is your second time to go, right?
I've been there briefly before, but it doesn't really count. So this is my first full-length trip in Ireland. Other than the weather, being 58 degrees, I think you mentioned Friday evening we had a little celebration of all the different churches, and I don't know if we talked about it here or if it was dinner and deploy, but it was Pam Choi's church, which is an evangelical church, the Church of Ireland, which is like an Anglican church, the Methodist Church, and then we actually had the VBS at a Catholic school, elementary school. So really, and our church, that's 5 different, I would say, denominations coming together. But the neatest thing for me looking around Friday night was looking at all these different denominations. It's not about a denomination. It's about a relationship with Christ, and that we could all come together with one purpose and one goal, which is to share his love. That was just neat, looking around the room, seeing all those different people from all the different churches that had come to volunteer for that.
And
week.
Irish dancing. We did some Irish dancing.
Oh, is there footage?
There is.
I can't wait to see that.
Price. Yeah, for a price.
It is not my finest moment. I look pretty
a
aggressive.
Is that what they call it? A Kaylee?
A Kaylee? Yeah.
Kaylee.
Something like that. Yes. Yeah. And so we learned some Irish dances, and then we had an Irish party. It was great food. Yeah, but you're right. To have all these people from all over together in that place, recognizing that Jesus is Lord, this was really cool. It was really special. So I think we're going to go back next summer. So be on the lookout. Be listening.
Yeah, Chuck is very intentional, like you said, about not having these sort of one stops, but really pouring into those local relationships to strengthen their reach and their community.
So it's really cool. Man, Eric, thank you for coming on and visiting with us. Fun. I think I talked over half the interview.
That's why I tried to say, okay, Eric, what do you think? A couple of times. So Jennifer run the show. Do you have a final question for us?
I got a lot to say. Yes.
You said you did. You bragged about it.
If you were to win a race of speed doing anything, like what would it be?
Okay.
If you could win a race in speed of doing anything, what would it be?
And we'll answer first, Eric. You can ponder this for a moment. So basically, what's the fastest thing you can do?
What is the fastest? What is the fastest thing you do?
I historically and even now have struggled with speaking slowly. Like if I am not thinking about it, I will fly through something really fast. It was so bad in my first church. I was minister of youth and announcements. So you just, you're the guy that does the announcements every Sunday. It was my one job. And I literally read the bulletin to these people. Like I didn't make it up. I didn't whatever. And every week they'd be so mad at me. Some very kind person, age doesn't matter. But this person or these people would always complain about how fast I went. And I kind of got it at the same time. I was like, I'm reading the paper you're holding. Like, so it's kind of intentional that I'm trying to like blow through this because it's almost pointless. I'm reading the bulletin to you, but thank you. I'll try and slow down. And then also whenever I preached in that church, man, they couldn't stand it. But then I went to another church, my next church, I went to the senior pastor. He spoke faster than me. And so when I was up there, I was like, great. But if I really had to speak fast, that's probably the fastest thing I can do. It's not anything movement related. That's for sure.
Yeah. I think for me, it's putting on my makeup. I'm pretty fast at that.
Nice.
I can do it at a stop sign.
Whoa.
Or a red light, maybe.
That's impressive.
I do. I'm pretty fast.
Do you keep your makeup in your, like just on your person all the time?
Kind of.
Okay.
A little bit. But yes. I think I can put it on so fast. I don't have all these, like, I don't know if you know this, but they're up to like 9 and 10 products that people put on before the makeup even starts.
I'm not aware of that, but
it's intense.
Wow.
This may be our last podcast where I'm not at that point. I'm about to create a big old face.
Oh yeah.
Scheduling routine.
Okay.
But right now I'm really fast at putting on makeup.
Yeah.
Eric, what about you?
That is an interesting question. It sounds strange. I really enjoy doing my yard. I've kind of got it down. During COVID, we let our yard guy go because I'm like, I'm not going to be here and have 2 grown, able-bodied boys at home. So I actually enjoy doing my own yard. And so I've got it down to a science of mowing, edging, weed eating, blowing, all that kind of stuff. And it's just immediate satisfaction. And I can do that pretty quick, get it knocked out pretty quick.
Well, I would say this, you're faster at your yard than anyone else, I'm sure. Like no one else could come in and do it faster than you by themselves.
They could, because I have crews. I used to have a crew.
I mean, by themselves though, by themselves.
No.
Yeah.
I've got it down to an art and a science. I know exactly how long.
Yes. No other person could beat you on their own. That's great.
Good. That's cool. All right. Well, Eric, thank you so much for coming. And I think, Justin, you got some things to say.
Of course. I've always got things to say. Thank you for joining us. If you listen to this podcast on a podcast app and you want to watch us, you can always check out the YouTube link in the description of this podcast. Wherever you are, if you're listening, we'd love for you to rate, review, and subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, just like it and share it. Those are free things you can do. So if you've never liked something we've done and you keep listening to us, what's wrong with you? Like just literally press the like button.
What's wrong with you?
That's it. And we'd love for you to share this with someone who's interested in missions and learning more about that. If you want to learn more about missions with our church, cityrise.org/missions. We keep that up to date on all the trips that are coming up. We are reaching kind of the end of our mission season. There's maybe 1 or 2 this year that you could still get in on, but keep your eyes on that webpage because we keep that up to date with ways to get involved in one of our many mission trips each year. And as always, you can email us at podcast@cityrise.org if you have any suggestions for people that we can talk to.
All right. Thanks so much. And thank you guys for being with us. We hope you've had an almost amazing time on the Almost Amazing Dinner Party.
It's not the dinner party. You haven't done that in so long.
We hope you've had an almost amazing time on the Almost Amazing Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Almost Amazing Podcast from the CityRise Network, based in Houston, Texas. CityRise is a partnership of church campuses, nonprofits, and missionaries devoted to lifting our city and the world by generously giving the gospel of Jesus Christ. For more information or to find a church campus close to you in the Houston area, visit cityrise.org.